Ai, which is near Beth Aven to the east of Bethel, and told them, go and spy out the region. Why do you guys think that this is a problem? That Joshua sent the guys out?
God had control of Jericho, and then he's trying to step in and plant it himself.
Yeah. God didn't tell Joshua to go stake out the land of Ai. Joshua just did it by himself. So that's a huge problem. That's pretty disobedient. When they returned to Joshua, the spies said, not all the army will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and do not weary the whole army. So they've got their eagles already built up. For only a few people lived there. So about 3,000 went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of them. They chased the Israelites from the city gate as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted with fear and became like water. Well, God didn't tell you to go there. And they are, once again, disobedient. So soon after coming into the promised land. Then Joshua goes through the usual repentance mode. He tears his clothes, falls face down on the ground before the ark of the Lord, and he stayed there till evening. And all the elders did the same thing. They're going to, they think that God abandoned them, but what they forgot is God didn't send them. They weren't supposed to go. And Joshua said, alas, sovereign Lord, why did you... Look at this. Even Joshua falls into the standard Israelite whining. Alas, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan River to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Whine, 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 whine. He sounds just like one of the scared Hebrews. Pardon your servant, Lord. What can I say, now that Israel has been routed by its enemies? The Canaanites and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they'll surround us and wipe us out. And the Lord says to Joshua, stand up. What are you doing laying on your face? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. God told Moses to tell all the Israelite leaders, you need to read the law constantly. You need to have it in front of you so you never make these mistakes. And right here, Joshua makes a big mistake, and he's blaming God for his problems. God tells him in verse 12, I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. Because God knows Achan is going to infect all the other people. Verse 13, go consecrate the people, tell them, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow. So God's telling them, we're going to worship tomorrow, and we're going to take care of the problem. In the morning, present yourself tribe by tribe, and God knows sooner or later the guy who caused all the trouble is going to come forward. Verse 20, Achan replies, it is true, I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I have done. When I saw in the plunder a beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent, with the silver underneath. So they checked it out. It's all there. So guess what? Just like a normal sacrifice, he's got to be wiped out. His entire family's got to be wiped out. And all his animals, everything. And where it happened, that is now called the Valley of Trouble, the Valley of Achor. You see that in verse 24.
So they stoned them.
Because remember, that's the standard method of killing people in Israel. Why? I have no idea. Then, as Christy said in verse 25, then all of Israel stoned him. Can you imagine 1 million people throwing rocks at you? Of course, the whole family, too.
And And
then after they have stoned the rest, they burn them. So they basically use them as a sacrifice. Because remember, in sacrifices, you kill them, then you burn them completely. Over Achan, they heaped a large pile of rocks, which remains to this day. Then the Lord turned from his fierce anger. Therefore, that place has been called the Valley of Trouble ever since. That guy's taken care of.
Thought process again.
Yes, sir.
Judah was probably the most important tribe.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of seems strange that they didn't start at the bottom and go up. They started at the top and went down. God knew, and you wonder how they were selected. If Joshua had an inkling then from God. Maybe.
We'd have to go back to when the family first started, do a little bit of backtracking to see how they came about. But another good question, Gary.
And then not only him, but his family and all of his possessions.
Yep, every one of them.
By association.
Yeah. The children are responsible for the sins of their father, at least up to that point. Joshua 8, Ai destroyed. Then the Lord said to Joshua, once again, do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, just like God said before when they first moved into the promised land. Take the whole army with you and go up and attack Ai. For I have delivered into your hands the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. You shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king, except you may carry off the plunder and livestock for yourselves.
If that guy just waited.
If he would have just waited.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well. So when I read this, I figured, well, why is God allowing them to take plunder this time and you couldn't do it in Jericho? Because these are still cities in the promised land. Okay? Remember in Deuteronomy, we only had two distinctions. If the city was in the promised land, you had to totally wipe it out. If it wasn't in the promised land, then you could take plunder from it. So one of the commentaries that I read, only one, said that the reason they were allowed to take plunder from this town, from Ai, is that Jericho was the first fruits.
Oh.
So Jericho was the first fruits sacrifice, and that completely took care of this area. So then they were allowed to take plunder from Ai. To me, that sounds logical. I would have liked to see two commentaries say that, but it only came in one. So we'll apply logic in this case. So that might be
It'd
the
be
reason.
kind of like in Acts where the couple withheld the sale of the property, struck dead when they lied.
Yep. Yeah. And it's interesting, the wife lied even though her husband was already wiped out. But greed is greed. Then not a lot is happening. Let's see here. Joshua musters his army, marched towards Ai. The entire force marches up with them. They approach the city, set up camp. This is where they had the ambush. That's why. Okay. Verse 24. When Israel had finished killing all the men of Ai in the fields and in the wilderness after the ambush, and when every one of them had been put to the sword, all the Israelites returned to Ai and killed those who were in it. 12,000 men and women fell that day, all the people of Ai. For Joshua did not draw back the hand that held out his javelin until he had destroyed all who lived in Ai. But Israel did carry off for themselves the livestock and plunder for the city, as the Lord had instructed Joshua. So Joshua burned Ai and made it a permanent heap of ruins, a desolate place to this day. So what I thought was interesting is that even before Ai, the town of Ai, was wiped out, Ai means ruin. So it's almost like it was meant to be. Kind of crazy.
But I thought he said the king would God says the king of Ai,
Uh-huh.
but he ends up killing the king.
Yeah, the king was supposed to be killed.
Oh.
Yeah. And Joshua didn't just kill the king, he impaled the body of the king on a pole and left it there till evening.
Yeah, that's like Haman. Same thing.
Yeah.
Exciting.
I got kind of a kick out of the handout that had the Joshua's brilliant military strategy,
Yeah.
showing how he planned it. He could probably get through the Naval Academy without any problems.
Yeah. That's this one.
Oh,
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
When they pile these stones on top of after they kill these people,
Uh-huh.
that sort of is that opposite of what today's thinking is? Because that would mark the spot if it made them like heroes. Where today they don't want people that are not to be remembered to have some special burial place that might cause that to become a place of more or less worship.
Yeah, I don't know, Jeanette. Maybe that's a marker to say here's where our enemies are, and the same could happen to you. I don't know. It's a really good point. You know, instead of sending them off to an unmarked grave, to kind of like make a marker for them. So good point.
I don't know.
I don't know. The covenant renewal at Mount Ebal, starting in verse 30. Then Joshua built on Mount Ebal an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel. As Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the Israelites, he built it according to what was written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of uncut stones, on which no iron tool had been used. So why do you think that they used an altar of uncut stones?
Defile the altar.
Why, Gary?
Defile the altar, using human tools on an area to sacrifice to God.
That's
Natural stones.
Yep, that's one area, one reason.
God didn't just want the basic stones. He
Right.
didn't want all these cut stones for him. He wanted just,
Yeah, he wanted the beauty to be him, not the altar.
yeah.
Exactly. One of the couple commentaries that I read said that God asked for uncut stones so people wouldn't worship the altar instead of him. So I started reading this and it's like, wow. How often do we, not often, sometimes we build these large edifices, these large churches, and the grander the better. When if we would have read the Old Testament, we would have just seen that God wants plain buildings. He doesn't want anything elaborate. As I was reading this, my mind went to Church of the Resurrection, which is Adam Hamilton's church, and he said he built it so it would be this glorious structure that lasts 100 years. And I'm thinking, wow, are you off base? It's designed so it catches the sunlight, and it does this, it does that. It's like, he needs to read his Old Testament.
Yeah, God doesn't want that.
God doesn't want, and like he told David, who are you to build this great temple for me? Did I ever tell you to build me a temple? And he didn't allow David to build a temple. So I think maybe we have to be a little bit, we have to change our thinking sometimes.
That's why I like the Thorntown Chapel, because it's just windows and the nature's all around, and
Yeah,
and it's just, it's just really
yeah.
lovely. And it's not
Someone was
fancy.
paying attention to that idea. When I go to the church Rob and Jill go to in Aurora, to me it's like a dungeon. It doesn't have any windows and it's gray.
Wow.
And then they turn out the lights so you can't see anybody around you, and only you can see the people that are down front, either singing or talking. So in a way, it keeps you from being distracted.
Sure.
But I couldn't go to that church all the time because it's to me it's like going in a cave, and I can't stand caves.
Yeah,
Okay.
me too. I'd be with you on that.
Yeah.
Claustrophobic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think next time Stephen wants to talk to me about a building project, I'll refer him to Joshua chapter 8, verse 31. We ain't building nothing. We got all the church we need.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
First-
yeah.
Yeah,
Hello.
no thanks. No thanks. Afterward, verse 34, afterward Joshua read all the words of the law, the blessings and the curses, just as written in the book of the law. So as we know, the book of the law is the first 5 books of the Bible, written by Moses,
Oh,
that we've already gone through. Because basically that's all that existed at the time. It was Torah. There was not a word. Pardon?
Do you think he read the entire 5 books?
I'm sure he did. If Moses said, read the book of the law, I'm sure he read the book of the law.
At that time, the only thing they probably had were the 10 Commandments in words. Everything else was hand-me-down and
Pro-
here's to remember.
Probably because it was all oral history. So, yeah, probably a lot of it wasn't written down. Maybe all the other laws in Deuteronomy and Leviticus were written down, but hard to say. But all we know is, pardon?
All right. In verse 23, I had trouble figuring out where the mountains were.
Okay.
Did they travel from the destruction
All right, let's see here.
to Mount Gizzerim,
Abel?
in front of Mount Ebal? A little bit I could find it was farther north, and, to take a couple of million people that far just to hear those.
Do we have it on any of our maps?
Well, there's Mount Grizzum. Grizzlium? Gerzium? In front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of Mount Abel.
What verse?
33? Verse 33.
So they were mountains side by side from what I could figure out.
Okay. Both the foreigners living with them, among them, and the native born were there. Half the people stood in front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of Mount Ebal.
Mount Gerizim?
Yeah. Well, we know only the fighting men were at Ai, so I guess we'd have to see where their camp was. Another good question.
So they had just wiped out AI, got the spoils.
It's it's in the West Bank. Nablus, a valley in which Nablus is situated. I don't know where Nablus is.
Okay, so what we need to find out is where their camp was and where that is in relation to Gerizim and Ebal.
Here's Google Maps.
Yep. Okay, we'll have an answer by next week. All right, very good.
Well, it says here in the footnotes that Mount Ebal was at near the city of Shechem, where Abraham had built an altar. It says.
I don't show it.
Okay, we'll get that map. We'll get it laid out.
Yeah, I can't find it. And it could be because I am looking at the current map of Mount Abel, not a... It got a 4.6 on their map. So-
Okay.
And it's 2:45 a.m.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I don't.
So the last thing I found out interesting was in verse 35 that there were still foreigners living among the Israelites. So these could have been people that they acquired in the conquests that they had under Moses. These could be foreigners that lived with them in Egypt, because remember, when we studied Exodus, we found out that Hebrews weren't only Israelites, they were like the lower class of people. So these foreigners could have been with them from the time of Egypt, the second generation of foreigners, could have been slaves that they got from battles, or could even be people that wanted to hang out with the Israelites. Hard to say, but it wasn't just Israelites.
It was probably kind of an exciting time to have the book of the law read to them, because they probably didn't have Bible study as they traveled through the desert for 40 years, knowing all of them would be wiped out.
Yeah, they didn't do a lot. You know, as we read the Bible, I'm finding that they didn't do a lot during those 40 years. They didn't have Passover during the 40 years. They didn't do circumcisions during the 40 years. We know they didn't farm or do anything else because God fed them.
Right.
So you wonder, what in the world did they do for 40 years besides
Figure
walk
out how to
around?
eat manna.
Yeah, they ate manna and quail. So, very interesting. But that's it. That's Joshua 6 through 8. I think we can continue to keep this pace of 3 chapters. And that's good because that takes us to Mark towards the end of Lent. So we'll be getting to the end of Mark just as Holy Week comes upon us and Easter. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting to be able to go through the end of Mark at that same time. So it's going to be in sync. Any other questions pop up in Joshua 6 through 8?
I had a question.
Yes?
When I was in Sunday school a long time ago, I was told that the walls of Jericho had sacrifices in the walls, like for children. But when we were reading the Bible, I didn't see that.
Yeah. In one of the commentaries I read, Peggy, it said that in some cases they would put bodies of sacrifices in the walls to ward off evil spirits. And that's something that they even think that the guy who rebuilt Jericho did, that he sacrificed his 2 sons and put them in the walls. So somebody who taught you Sunday school did their research. And some things we don't see in the Bible, but you get from other outside sources of the time. And it's always important to study these other documents so we understand the people of the time, and we get to understand that the Moabites and the Canaanites, they weren't unusual people in sacrificing their family or their children. This is something that happened a lot. And that's one of the things that God didn't want the Israelites to copy. So the laws that he gave them, a lot of them were related to not allowing sacrifice of children. For example, one of the laws in Leviticus says that you can't boil a calf in its mother's milk, because that all deals with issues of life. And God doesn't want any type of sacrifice. God has always said that life is sacred, no matter whose life it is. So to have these people sacrificing their children and putting them inside walls, that's something that probably could have happened. So you got a good teacher.
Were these 2 cities destroyed? Were they Canaanites?
Yep. Yep, they were part of the pagan classes.
I have a book, it was the Life and Times, something in the time of Jesus, and it lists all these, it has a lot of information about all these various tribes and stuff that were around at that